All righty. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you at Club Pre-Med, the monthly web chat. This one, I'm excited about this one. So you all know the topic, and it's a favorite topic of well, maybe a favorite and a dreaded topic for everyone. But I'm really excited today because we get to hear from people who have lived it, you know. So I have gathered some applicants who are actually in the current cycle and have done to great work on that MCAT, and that's what this session is about. We the the team here would love for you to walk away with some new ideas, some new encouragement for this exam. You know, there has been a lot of discussions about this, and a very few medical schools across the country have suspended their MCAT requirement, but the vast majority still require it. It is it is your proof that you can take a huge amount of information, complex scientific information, organize it, know it, understand it. And that's what you're going to be doing from day one in medical school. So it's not just a hurdle, and it's not just a useless thing that we make y'all do because we did it back in the day. It really is, and people who are successful at this um, have better skills. You're gathering better and better skills than towards the medical school experience, right? So without further ado, thank you so much, Vanessa. Look, A-team is here. Yay, that's nice. Thank you so much. And I would, so yeah, there's Vanessa. I need to introduce you to Vanessa on the A-team. So she'll be in the behind the scenes, sort of following the chat, or if anybody needs anything, Vanessa's watching out for us. But I would like to introduce you to our panelists, okay? And so I'm going in alphabetical order. So Victoria, oh, I should have asked you a moment ago, say it once for me and then I'll know it.
Aquawo.
Aquawo. Okay, just like it sounds. Yep. So Victoria Aquawo is from Murphy, Texas. I have a question mark about that. Where's Murphy, Texas?
It is right next to Plano, Texas, and North Dallas.
Okay, great. So she's from Murphy, Texas, graduated from Texas A&M in chemistry. She's working as an ER scribe in Dallas at Children's Hospital, maybe a Children's Hospital network. She is a reader, and she is a Nigerian cultural dancing enthusiast. So there's Victoria, one of our specialists. Moses Alfaro is from Mathis, Texas. I have question marks by Mathis, Texas too. Where's Mathis, Texas, Moses?
It's right next to Corpus Christi in South Texas.
Okay. We're neighbors. Close to San Antonio. Did I tell y'all welcome to Long School of Medicine? I forgot to throw Long School of Medicine in there. Anyway. Welcome. Moses is from Mathis, Texas. He graduated from UT Austin. He has expertise as a crisis text line counselor and has a YouTube channel that we'll all have to go visit, Moses. Connie Miranda is our next specialist. Hi, Connie. Look, we've got a great diverse panel. Connie is not a Texan. She's from Florida and studied at the University of Florida after New College of Florida, I believe, first. And she is scribing at a trauma center in Florida, and she is into fitness. So thank you, Connie, for being here. And last but not least, so we've got like a couple more, we've got a little bit more A&M than we do UT Austin. So I'm sorry, Moses, or any other Longhorns out there. Justin, Rowe or Rao?
Rowe. Like
Rowe. I'm sorry, I didn't ask y'all previously. Justin is from Bryan, Texas. He studied, where do you think he studied? Texas A&M University. And were y'all in the same class, Victoria and Justin?
I was class of 2019.
So was I. I was a BIMS major. So.
It's a big place. And Justin is also working for Scribe America. Like, who else is Scribe America? Connie. Oh, like 3 of the 4. That's awesome. So also working for Scribe America in College Station and does woodworking and takes care of the family horse. So I thank you all so much, for the group. When I was going through the applications for this year, I saw so many accomplishments, so many wonderful things by so many great applicants. These or our panelists today are people who stood out, particularly because of this topic, because they worked hard to organize themselves and do a great job at that MCAT. So now I'm going to give them a few minutes each. Here's the format of the day. Victoria and Moses and Connie and Justin are going to give you in bullet form how they did this, what they accomplished, and how they did it, their best tips. There's going to be some repetition, there's going to be some overlap, but we'll go down the row and let them present. And then I do have your questions. We want to get to a lot of questions today. I told them before, I'm going to try like not to talk so much, but and let them, the experts, be your best resource today. They are your best resource, okay? So we're going to start with Victoria, and we'll be watching the chat too for questions. Victoria, would you please let us know how you
Sure.
did?
Good morning, everyone, or hello. I don't know what time it is wherever you're at, but I just kind of wanted to hop in there and just share like my own journey and how I was able to kind of increase my MCAT score. So first of all, I took the MCAT for the first time in 2018. I got a 499 on that one. And so kind of, as you know, the 500 is like that 50th percentile, that middle road. And that's kind of like the place I wanted to be. So the 499, I was like, it's a little bit lower than I wanted. So I knew the second time around when I was going to retake it that I really wanted to get it higher. And my goal was a 510. And that was a little scary for me just because it was an 11-point jump and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to be able to do it. But luckily I was able to hit that exact 510 mark. So I just kind of wanted to share with you guys how like the steps I took to get to my goal and reach it. So I think the number one thing that I wanted to emphasize was really to give yourself time. First time I applied, I took the test. I was kind of rushing it. I was still in school full time and trying to study for all my chemistry courses while trying to study for the MCAT on top of it, which is completely doable, but you just really have to give yourself that additional time. So I would say about the sweet spot is to give yourself at least 3 months of study time. I would say no more than 6 months. For me, the second time around, my sweet spot was about 4.5 months out. I was able to kind of really like space it out and give myself time to go through some content review and also some practice questions towards the end. So I wasn't feeling too rushed and it wasn't too long of a time where I was getting burnt out from just seeing MCAT 24/7. So about anywhere from 3 to 6 months is the best way to do it. And my second tip is just kind of like know your study habits and what works well for you. I know some people sign up for MCAT classes and there's just already so much of a financial burden already applying to medical school. So I was trying to find ways to kind of like reduce that risk and everything. And I know for myself, I know I'm the type of person where if I can just get my study materials all together, sit in a room, I can study for a few hours on end. So I knew the best bet for me was just to really get some really good MCAT study resources. And for me, that was Kaplan. I can't recommend Kaplan enough. I think they do an amazing job getting all their content review and putting it in really good books that are easy to like digest and go through the material where it's not too wordy, where you're just like reading pages and pages and pages of information that isn't going to stick in your head. They have, I think content wise, Kaplan is the best and it worked the best for me, but I know there's plenty others like Princeton Review, Exam Crackers, or other books out there, and you kind of understand your study schedule, what works for you, and kind of go after that. So that's what I did. I got my Kaplan books, and what's really great about Kaplan too is that they make pre-made study calendars for you, whether you're 1 month, 2, 3, or 6 months out. So I did the 12-week one calendar. I followed it the best I could. And that leads me kind of like into my next tip is content review is really, really important. And I think there's a lot of merit in it because it's important, especially if you're out of college, like I was when I was taking the MCAT. You're not in your classes. So that's kind of like the first time that you've been out of school. So it's nice to kind of like remember all that information you learned. But content review is not the only thing. I think it's important to do it for, I say the first couple months, but you have to kind of like, and it kind of ends up being a little bit of a crutch because it's nice just to be knowing, oh, I'm just going to read through this information and remember it and review it. But really the bread and butter of your MCAT testing is going to be doing practice questions. And so I really relied on the AAMC. They have really good materials to go through. They have practice questions and full-length practice exams. So I really focused on doing content review for the first half of my study schedule. And then for the last half, really just started going through question banks and full-length practice exams because you're still reviewing content when you're doing those practice exams and those practice questions, but it kind of lets you understand how the MCAT test is going to be. And it's a really tough test, but I've always said it's a fair test. You just have to really be studying the right way and studying for the test and getting familiar with like the timing of everything and building your endurance up. So those were pretty much my key things right that for the MCAT setting for me.
Good. Thank you so much. All right, Moses, let's hear. I know you all are formulating some questions. We don't have any content topic questions yet. So Moses, go ahead and tell us your tips.
Yeah, of course. So I'll just explain my MCAT, how many times I took it, and my score. I'm comfortable sharing my score. I feel like being real like that makes y'all feel comfortable, and it just, there's no like anonymity to it. So I took my MCAT, I believe, in March of 2018, and I was a sophomore in college. I was a second year, and that's where you can see it was like my first error because I was taking it during the year. And my mindset at that time was just really underestimating it. And I was still even taking some of the prereqs during that semester. Like I was still in the middle of biochem. I didn't even take physics 2 yet. And I was still in the middle of OChem 2. You can ask me later why I chose to do that. But I originally got a 496 on my first exam. So for me, that wasn't no surprise because I didn't really study as hard as I should have that first time around. And then, so I wasn't as disappointed. And then I took it 3 times actually. So the second time I took it a couple months later. And then I got a 503. And then I ended up taking it the third time, which was this past summer, like I think in June, and I ended up getting a 512. So I have those 3 scores. And then now I'm just going to tell you what I think worked for me and a couple of strategies that I used and just some words of encouragement that I think would be really helpful. So first thing would be do research on the exam. That's something I failed to do the first time. Like I said, I was still taking prereqs during the time for the MCAT. And don't get me wrong, some people do take the exam without taking like physics or maybe like psych and soc, and that's fine for them. It works for them. And if it works for you, that's great. For me, I personally wanted to go into those classes and be able to digest that material and be able to go through that because I think it was really helpful. You have more of a broad understanding before you take your exam. So just make sure to do your research, see all the prereqs that you need that are tested on the MCAT, and make sure you feel comfortable if you want to take them before or not. So that was the first mistake that I made, and that's something I just really want to convey because I think researching what's on it is just very important. Finding what resources you like and sticking with them. For me, I always say quality over quantity. There's, hundreds of resources. A lot of different companies offer a lot of great resources that you could use. But I think it could get overwhelming at times if you're trying to use multiple things that so many other people used at one time because you're saying, oh, it worked for them. Maybe I should use all of them. I think you should be able to stick to 1 or 2. I stuck with Khan Academy and UWorld and Kaplan. Those are the 3 that I used because I use Kaplan for content review and then I use UWorld for practice questions. I thought that was very helpful. And then for Khan Academy, I'm someone who yes, there's a lot of reading involved, but they have a lot of videos, especially for the behavioral science section. And for that, I wanted to watch it because it was just a break from reading text all day and every day and writing notes constantly. I just wanted to have something visual that was more stimulating and more pleasing to the eye. So that's something I also wanted to add. Just change up your study material. You don't always have to just read out of books. There's a ton of videos online as well that teach you a lot of great things. And yeah, just quality over quantity. Don't get overwhelmed. I found myself getting very overwhelmed because a lot of my friends use different companies like Exam Crackers, Next Step, and things like that, but I just really wanted to stick to one. Also, something that I found myself struggling with along the way was not being truthful to myself and what I didn't know. A lot of times I found myself saying, okay, yes, I do understand this, but I actually didn't understand it. I just didn't want to take the time to really understand what was going on and prepare myself. And I ended up skipping over those topics. Like maybe it was a certain reaction or a certain mechanism or just XYZ. And I didn't find myself truly understanding. I said, oh, I'll worry about it later, or it may not come up on the exam. And that was the type of mindset that I had. And I think it's very important for you to fully be aware of what you don't know, because it could come up on the exam. It's hard to be real with yourself because you might not want to spend so much hours on just one topic, but it will be so worth it, because those questions or that question can come up and really separate you from the score you want and from the score you didn't want in the end. And that's what I think really worked for me the third time around. And lastly, my last tip would be make a study schedule. I didn't have a concrete study schedule going into this. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to plan 3 months out from this, or I'm going to plan this week and that week to do X, Y, and Z and study these topics. And so when I was taking it that third time this past summer, I really made that study schedule and I stuck to it. And that's something I really recommend for y'all. It's really helpful and it'll be really beneficial. And that's what I found worked for me.
Good. Thank you so much. I'm hearing a lot of my story, my MCAT story in your stories. Connie, tell us.
Well, hello, everybody. I took my first MCAT back in 2016, actually, before taking biochemistry, so that's a big mistake there. And I got a 500, so like Victoria said, like around the 50th percentile. And then I took it a year later after taking biochemistry, and to my surprise, I got 2 points less. Now, out of overconfidence, or I don't know, expecting a miracle, I still applied to medical school. In the 2017-2018 application cycle. And of course, I didn't have the metrics, so I didn't even get interviews. And by not having the metrics, I mean, I had a poor MCAT and no GPA because New College of Florida is pass-fail. And so this is where my first advice comes from. So ask for help. And you all already did like a big first step by coming here today and seeking advice and seeking what has worked for other people. In my case, I asked for help from professors and classmates and even my family members that have gone to medical school. And in the end, I went to UF for a pre-health post-bac program that was like 2 years long to earn a GPA, but also spend more time studying for the MCAT. It wasn't until 6 months before my actual MCAT that I started to really study and or focus studying. And I took the third attempt last July and I got a 14-point jump. So clearly something worked this time. And I can really summarize those differences in like 3 bullet points. The first one is that I took 12 full-length exams, and that seems like a lot, but it's 7 of those were truly full-length 7-hour test-like conditions exams in a period of 6 months. But 5 of those were section exams. So every week I slotted a time for just one section each week. And the key here is going back and actually reviewing what you got wrong and making a list of the topics and the reason you got it wrong. It may be that you forgot the equation, you misinterpreted the figure, you didn't know the passage at all, I don't know. But a week before taking the MCAT, I went back and reviewed everything I got wrong to just refresh what to look for, common mistakes, things like that. And then the second thing I did differently is I did equation flashcards for every equation testable, even the simpler ones. And I did 3 piles. I did daily, weekly, monthly reviews, and I review monthly the equations that were easy, but daily those equations that very complex for me, especially physics. All those equations I just needed daily review, and by the time I took the MCAT, they really come to me super quick, and it was a huge difference for me, especially in the chem phys section, of course. And then the last one, the last tip that I have is similar to what Moses said. Focus on what is the most challenging for you. So I use the Kaplan, the 7 subject books, and I went through every chapter, and I took, at the end of every chapter, there's a quiz. So I took that first, and that was like a self-assessment on how I was doing each chapter, and then I color-coded each of them. So green was, I'm a master, I got like 9 to 10 in the quiz. Yellow was, I need to review it, it got an 8, something like that, I need to review it. Orange was, this is more challenging for me, so I need to spend a little bit more time on this. But then red was, this is confusing, I really need to spend more time on this. And for me, again, physics, all of those chapters were red. And then I did my own study schedule, where I started with the red ones and created my own deadlines. Like this week, I have to review this amount of chapters. I personally did 1 chapter a day. So I know some people do like 3 a day, but I just focused on 1, and I did practice questions, and I gathered all the information I got, not from only Kaplan, but also like Khan Academy is a great resource, or your textbooks. I mean, you are reviewing those in class. So all of those are great resources for you. No, that's about it.
Great. That's great. There is good stuff in here. What have you got for us, Justin?
So I have just 3, I guess, main points. I guess I'll start with my MCAT. So I took my first MCAT between my junior and senior year in 2018, and I got a 504. And then I tried to go through the application cycle with that score, and I didn't get in the interview. And then this last year, on June 19th, I guess, I retook it, and I was able to get a 516 on it. So you've kind of heard this mentioned a bunch of times, but I guess I'll talk about my 3 main points. The first is going to be just having this uninterrupted scheduled study time. The second is going to be, and I actually just heard Moses mention this, prereqs. I didn't think about that until he mentioned it. So that's, yes, prereqs. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is practice problems. So for me, I had decided I was going to take my MCAT that first time after completing that spring semester. And I just thought, okay, I'll study for it when I have time. And it wasn't really a formatted schedule. And so what I found happened was I kind of pushed off MCAT for classes that were going on now, for like my next test next week, or for an organizational event. And so I found that the MCAT kind of got pushed to the back burner. And then before I knew it, I had 17 days before the MCAT, and that's when I really started studying hard. And so it's not impossible to do it while you're still in school, but you have to be diligent in making a study schedule that you're going to stick to. That'd be the first main point, is that study schedule. Prereqs, I didn't realize how important prereqs were. And so physics is a big one, biochemistry. And what I found after I had graduated, because I took the MCAT the second time after completing my undergraduate, what I found was I would remember the topic, but then the in-depth level that the MCAT wanted didn't reach quite what the class taught. So having that familiarity with the content was really helpful, because I remember seeing content, physics was a big one, and thinking, oh, that's all we need to know. We don't need to go deeper. And so just being familiar with it from having seen it before helped kind of pick things back up a lot quicker. So again, kind of looking at those prereqs and seeing what you need to take before actually taking the MCAT, I would say is a big tip. And lastly, the third one, practice problems. To me, this is the best advice I could give you. Practice problems, practice problems, practice problems. I was actually discussing with one of the ER docs about how I should study for my MCAT the second time around. And he gave me this kind of cool metaphor that I'll share with you. If you wanted to be an expert in shooting free throws, would you go to the library and read books on free throws and like read papers on free throws? Or would you go to the gym and shoot free throws? Like you need to actually shoot free throws. And the MCAT is the same way. Yes, content review is super important, but at the end of the day, if you don't know how to physically shoot that free throw, in other words, you don't know how the MCAT's going to ask about physics, how is it going to ask about biochemistry, then you can have the knowledge and not understand how you need to use it. And so for me, I let my practice problems dictate what content I reviewed. So over the course of 4.5 months, I would do anywhere from 40 to 80 practice problems a day. I would time myself to make sure I had the same stress that you're going to have on the actual MCAT. And then every question I got wrong, I went through every single answer choice. It was wrong for this reason. This was right for this reason. And then I would make notes of it. And at the end of the day, I reviewed all of my wrong content. And so I kind of had that source of stuff that, hey, this is what you struggled with. And periodically I would go back through and look over that content. And so I saw a question about trying to memorize so much information. Yes, there are going to be like the formulas. You just have to put pen to paper and memorize, make flashcards. But for me, I found that if I just kind of wrote out what I was struggling with and then memorized that, you weren't trying to bite this or trying to climb this entire mountain at once. You could focus on the things you were struggling with. So practice problems, practice problems, practice problems. And for me, I used Kaplan, and they have a QBank system, which has like thousands of questions. And I'm pretty sure I went through every single question. And they also have the 7-book resources. So I use that as my content for if I missed a question, I would go to those and learn everything about that question that I could. So if again, like the biggest point I can stress is practice problems.
I'm hearing a lot of great things, and we're going to watch the chat. I have your questions up here too that we'll start asking the experts. But here's what I hear is organized, discipline to attack that organized plan, and some self-reflection. Don't try to fool yourself into thinking that you can like do without the physics. That's exactly what I did. I took it like before, and I hated physics. And isn't that bad? And then I got into ophthalmology, and oh my gosh, so it still gave me a fit. All the light stuff, anyway, and lasers and all that stuff. But anyway, there's some really great themes, and people are going to want to know some details about keeping track. I think you all mentioned a little bit about like keeping track of what you missed to go back. So we might have some specific questions. Who used a spreadsheet to sort of keep track of? Okay. And Victoria and Justin, how did you keep track of like what you were missing, what you needed to hit?
Yeah, for me, that was huge too. Like the whole idea of writing down what you went wrong, but also it's not also important to review what you missed, but also what you got right. So when I would take my full-length practice exams, I would go through the section banks and the question banks. I would take them again under time. So I would kind of be used to like the timing I'd have on the real day, but I would have a notebook and I would just go through the question. I'd read, because all those resources are great. They show you the right answer and they show you why each question is right, each answer is right, and then why all of the ones were wrong. So I went through each one, and if I got it right, I even wrote down why I got it right and like kind of like matched up with the little paragraph they gave you. And then for the one that I got wrong, I would do the same thing. And so I would just write it in a little notebook, and kind of like just at the end of the day, I would just review everything that I got wrong and everything I got right too. So it just kind of keeps on reinforcing it in your head.
I heard several months. Victoria said 3 to 6, but 4.5 was her sweet spot. How many hours in that great attempt, the one where you got everything together, how many hours do you think it took? Think about that. You can throw it back at me later.
I would say that I spent several hours a day. I don't know what that would equate to, but I was originally going to take it in March, and then COVID happened, and so it moved it to June. And so I started studying probably mid-January, and then when it got initially moved back, I took a couple weeks off. But several hours a day for sure is probably, like I said, I couldn't give you a total time, but 2 to 3 hours a day for sure.
I think I also heard everybody say MCAT was a daily thing. MCAT study was daily, right? No? Moses, did you do it differently?
Well, I guess for the sake of like mental health and all of that, like some days you don't feel like doing, your MCAT studying. So like what I would do is just like I make milestones each week, and say if I don't end up doing it one day or 2 days a week, well then as long as I get my milestones done, then I'm staying on track. So that's kind of how I went about it.
Okay, good. I know that is the topic of a couple of questions in here. And I'll look at the chat in a second. How do you stay motivated? I think a couple of you mentioned, getting burned out or trying to prevent that. What did you do so that you weren't wallowing in the MCAT rather than focusing and learning what you needed to learn? What did you do to motivation to keep going when you felt slammed? Oh, we'll go down the road, Victoria.
Yeah, for me, I have like a really good memory. The first practice test that I took, so I did months and months of content review, and I was like, okay, it's time to start getting to some practice questions. So my first full length exam that I took, I got a 490, and that was 9 points behind what my original MCAT score was. So I just remember like being in the library, just like I was upset. I just like packed on myself and I went home, and I just had to like take a minute and I think I took for sure that full day off, and I just kind of like relaxed. I'm like, okay, you still have time. Like this isn't like the night before the exam where you're falling behind. You still have time. This is why you're taking these practice exams now, and it's okay. So I found out for me the best way even in like college too, the best way I always did to like decompress and relax was for me it's like watching TV or watching a movie and just like taking like a couple hours off, taking your mind away from like the test. Like everything's still going to be there. All your study materials are still going to be there later on, but it's important just to take time off and just like decompress and to relax, and so you're gonna not be burned out. You'll be able to wake up the next day and be refreshed and be able to like tackle it again.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to add anything? Okay, we've got a couple of what I'm going to say is two things. I talked to a lot of pre-meds individually and in our groups on the web chats, and remind them that it's just time. It's just time. And if time is getting away from you and you're starting to panic because it's coming up and you're out of time, then maybe you want to sometimes it's best just to reassess. You can't rush it. Am I right? You can't rush it. I think the other thing we've learned is it takes some time, some dedicated time. And the other thing I would say to people is if you need some inspiration, go like TED Talks, find some motivational, positive speaking person on a TED Talk and, do your Amy Cuddy pose, your power pose and your superpowers. And I think that helps a lot. Okay. So let me back up here. Is there a lot of physics on the exam? Yes, no, sorta. Too much for me. Too much for some of us.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Kane, but I also agree with Victoria that there was a lot of biochem, like more than you expect. I don't know, Gen Chem versus physics, I felt it was pretty balanced for me. I wish there was more OChem, but it was, I guess for me, just seeing a little bit of physics was a lot. So, but
Yeah. All right. Advice for timing, advice for getting faster at answering questions.
So I found, especially on the cars section, I was running out of time because I like to just like analyze everything in front of me. And the MCAT, they add that extra curveball in there where they put you under time. And so doing whatever type of practice problem, whether it's a simple one or a full-blown passage, I would count out, and I don't remember the exact number, but say a section has 90, or was it? Let's say a section has 50 questions and you have 90 minutes to do it. I would calculate how many minutes per question I could spend. And every time I did a practice problem, I put a timer that said, you have this amount of time to get through it. And many times, especially in the beginning, my timer would go off and I'd be halfway through my set of questions. And so really just using an old-fashioned timer or the one on your phone and doing practice problems will help speed you up to get you used to that kind of sense of urgency that you need.
Great, thank you. Cherish says, Moses, can you talk more about the milestones?
Yeah, of course. So what I meant by that is like, whenever I was doing content review, say like, okay, so I had 3 months, I would say, of studying. And so the first 2 months I dedicated to content review. Every week I sectioned out, I'm gonna do this chapter from this book or this chapter from this book. It'd be like 5 or 6 chapters and so many videos from Khan Academy about Psych and Soc. So really that's the milestones that I had. It was just a list of what I needed to get done in that week. I personally don't like doing it day by day because that just puts more pressure on you. And realistically, for me at least, a weekly thing was more attainable rather than a daily thing. So that's what I meant by milestones. And then if I didn't reach a milestone a certain week, that was fine. I just adjusted the rest of my schedule until it led up to my MCAT. And I also want to say one more thing. If you feel like you're not ready for your MCAT, it's totally okay to reschedule. The main important thing is that you do well whenever you take it. So if you have to push it back, that's totally fine, as long as you get the score that you want in the end.
When is the best time to make your first attempt at the MCAT, especially if you want to leave room between a second attempt and applying to medical school?
I'll take this one. I think that's a really good way to think it out. For me, that's where I think my first mistake came with my first MCAT. My whole schedule for applying to medical school got kind of pushed up that first time. I didn't realize like the timing of everything and how I was supposed to take it. So I kind of became aware about applying for med school in like December of my junior year. I was like, oh, applications open up in May while I'm still a junior. I had no clue. So everything kind of got pushed up for me. So I think this best time to take the MCAT is January, like that springtime of your junior year, if you can do it. If you want to apply like the traditional route of applying to medical school to start right after you graduate, like if you graduate spring and then you want to start that following fall, I think definitely that January of your junior year or that January of that application cycle is the best time to take the MCAT because you'll get your scores back in February. And if you're not too happy with your score, you still have time to retake it again in March or even I think April and May, they have dates too, right before the MCAT, right before the applications open up for that following medical school cycle. Because I took my MCAT the first time literally a week after I finished my finals for junior year. I took them in May of 2018. So I was studying, I did finals all for school, and then I had a full week of just studying for the MCAT, and then I took it. So it was a long process. That May time wasn't the best time for me. And so when I retook it the second time, I took it in January of this year, and I started studying for it in August. So I had from August to January to study, and I took it in January, and I think it went really well for me.
Would everybody say that time is your best resource? I kind of think time is the best resource. Vanessa also offered, this is a good time to talk about our timeline. And normally we don't take that January test, but this is a different year. And I think that especially since we are usually, our cycle, most of the Texas schools or TMDSAS schools are finished with their cycle in the interviewing part, right? And the evaluation of applicants by December, maybe a little bit into January. But now we're all interviewing in January and February to make, to help with all of the cancellations and all the difficulties that applicants have been through. So I think that, you know, if there aren't any other rules about it, we would be very flexible about that. If a January test came through and we are still in the evaluating process, then we would consider that applicant, you know, with a new score that shows some strength there. Let's see. Christopher says, do you feel Kaplan full lengths and QBank questions are indicative? I have a chart, you know, that there's a little variability in all of the practice tests that are available. Nothing's a perfect match, it seems. But I heard QBank, Kaplan a lot. Do you all think that it's reflective of the test? A good resource? Thumbs up.
I'll take a crack at that one. So I think Kaplan is amazing for content review. I do have to caution you a little bit. I do think their full-length practice exams are harder than the actual MCAT. And I know some people like to study harder for the test, but for me, I really was all about, I want to study how the test is. Because that first full-length practice exam that I took and I got like 9 points lower than my original MCAT score, I realized and I felt so bad about that. Afterward, my friend was like, you know, Kaplan's harder than the actual MCAT, so don't stress out about it too much. So I only did one full length Kaplan, and then I moved to the AAMC because they're amazing, and they have, neither the ones who make the MCAT, so they have all these previous old MCAT tests that they just put on like online for you to buy. And they also do the same thing with the question banks, like the section banks and the question packets for the CARS section, and I started using those for the full length exams, and those are exactly like the MCAT that you'll be taking. And so I think Kaplan is great for content, and then I would stick with AAMC for something that's true to the test for like your practice questions.
Great, thank you. And I see that y'all are answering the question. Sorry, I was like going from the top, and in this case I should be working backwards. So thank y'all for jumping in and answering those. Did somebody answer Lewis? So no later than May works well to take it for the first attempt?
I would say for me, timing wise, I was always, so the application typically opened in early May. And so the MCAT takes about a month to get your score back. So I would say I would try to shoot for having it done in March, because it gives you a month to get your score back to see kind of how you did. So for me, March was the date that I originally shot for, but then again, COVID happened and it pushed it back to June. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody answer Jasmine yet? Jasmine says, for someone taking the MCAT the summer after they finish prereqs, how would you recommend they study the prereqs that they're still completing? Like if you haven't quite finished the material, can you still do it?
I'll take that one. So I guess if you're taking a certain prereq during the summer and you're still studying at the MCAT, or you're still studying for the MCAT, I would say it depends on the prereq, honestly. Like if it's something like biochem, I feel like it's a little bit more challenging to, have the MCAT along with it. I feel like biochem, it's its own thing. But if it's something you're more comfortable in, like physics maybe, or psych and so, say you're taking like psychology, that's not every school has the same psychology course or psychology course. What the AMC wants you to study is very different from what other courses offer. It's very specific, if that makes sense, and you won't learn all those terms from that. So I would just say it really depends on the class that you're taking, honestly.
Yes, yeah, and what you still need to know. We have data we have data from decades ago that show, Jessica, that there is a correlation between how you're doing on your MCAT and there is a very close correlation with your STEP exams. Okay, so so what I said in the beginning, remember about having the skills to take a huge amount of information, process it, learn it, and show that you know it. It's the same kind of thing, right? It's the same skills. So Vanessa, thank you, Vanessa, for being here. So she says the TMB, y'all will have to look on the website, and I will too, it seems that we made an agreement at some point there to take the last MCAT for this cycle in September, to accept the last date in September. But you know, we are reviewing, and we're reviewing all up into January and February. We once a person has applied and they're in our pool, we keep reviewing. And so it's possible that some new scores, and we know when new scores come along, so it is possible that something could impact that. So I have to retract that answer and say unofficially, go check the website and the requirements by all the other schools. But you know, Long School of Medicine is pretty flexible in terms of those kinds of requirements. So thank you, Vanessa. Vanessa keeps me straight and true. Let's see. Okay, so how do you get over a plateau? And like, we're going to try to stay to this 1 o'clock thing, so we have about 15 minutes. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question. I can watch also the raised hands. Plateau.
Maybe
Like
you can take
getting the
this one.
same score.
Yes, well, yes, the same score, but also when you feel like you're not going anywhere, just change it up a little bit. I didn't do the last tip I gave you guys of going through every chapter and color coded them until like 2 months before my MCAT. Before that, I was just doing practice questions and reviewing here and there. I thought it was enough to already like be taking biochemistry in the meantime, or like reviewing it as I was doing them in my postbac program. But I found that more than just practice questions, reviewing the material was also great. Yet I didn't find the pre-made Kaplan study guides or study schedule useful for me. I felt that I needed something more guided towards what I needed. And that's why I decided to focus on what it was challenging for me. And I've said it countless times, for me it's physics, but for you guys maybe biochemistry, or I don't know. Another thing that was challenging for me was cars. English is my second language, and so sometimes I was reading those passages and I didn't know what they were saying. And so something I started doing about 3 months before the MCAT is doing a passage a day, and it was just 10 minutes of my day, and then reviewing and all of that. But just recognize when something is not working and you need to change it up. And also, like I said, ask for help. So if you think that you have reached a plateau, that your score is just not going anywhere, ask for advice from your advisor or from classmates, see how they're doing, and just try to rearrange your study schedule in a way that can help you move along.
Great, thank you so much. And Rebecca and I have ESP because I wrote down cars before I saw her in the chat. And so people want to know some specific advice. Hey, did I mention Haley Shoemaker is another panelist who got an interview? And so she couldn't be with us today, but she made you a 5-minute blurb on her tips for tackling the MCAT. So we are going to post that on the channel when this gets posted. Her advice, what she did was she read an article every morning. She would wake up and with her coffee, that was her morning routine, was to read scientific literature. What advice do you all have about cars specifically?
I'll take this one. So cars is a tricky one because at the surface it sounds really simple. Oh, I'm just gonna be reading some passages and answering questions. Like, oh, it'll be a nice little break from all the other like science and like memorization. But cars is like a lot trickier than it just seems. Kaplan is amazing. So if they're with their 7 subject books, their cars one in particular was really, really helpful for me because they list a lot of different techniques that you can use. And so I think I can't even remember how many different techniques that they use, but I ended up kind of picking 1 or 2 that I really liked and kind of like making a hybrid of them. So Kaplan kind of like will lay out different ways and they'll give you time, like an opportunities to like kind of practice with each one and see which one works best for you. But yeah, the best way that I could do it, and I think overall the best kind of way to tackle cars is knowing that the answer is in the text, like it's there and you don't have to have any prior memory of it. So that's kind of like where it's different from everything else. Like chem, phys, biochem, you kind of have to have some kind of baseline knowledge there. Cars, everything that you need is right there. All you need is all you have. So that kind of like helped take the edge off me a little bit. So when you're just going through the questions, you're always just trying to figure out where in the text can I support that or the best answer that's there. So that's kind of like the best way to do it. But definitely Kaplan has them listed out in their little subject book about cars. And I would definitely like go through that and try to figure out which one worked best for you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I see you put more in the chat for Alexis about that. So that's great. Did anyone study with another person or even in a group, and did that help you? And
I did. The section, the weekly section exams I took them as a group in my pre-health prospect program. Is only 6 of us. And we took them as a group, and at the end we just reviewed what we got right and wrong, and just brainstorm some ways of getting it right the next time and what works for some people. Of course, some people got it right, some people got it wrong. So just working together to see what works for them and see if it works for us.
great. I want y'all to notice that I think a lot of this, a lot of the advice revolves around not just gathering initially the right resources, but you have to kind of investigate all along the way what's the best way to change the plan or improve by seeing how something works, seek another resource. So I think the time that you spend on just the resources, just learning about the test, what do I want to say? The test, I'm losing my word, but you know what I'm saying? The not the content and not the understanding the content, but how it works is something that you're finding out, seems to me, all along the way, you know, to improve. So did any of you, were any of you working when you took the MCAT? Because I think that that's one of the hardest things when I'm advising people. I kind of end up saying, well, you just have to make time. But if you are working, we'd love to hear from you about how you made your schedule.
So I can take that one. So I've been a scribe full time now, so 40 hours a week since I graduated, and my shifts can range anywhere from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. to 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., just depending on if I'm in the ER or if I'm in clinic. And so for me, I would have like a weekly outlook at, okay, my work schedule is something that I can't move, I can't adjust. These are the times that I'm going to be occupied. And so then I would see what free time I would have, and I would allocate, okay, for 3 hours today, I'm doing practice problems, or, you know, however much time you can squeeze in. And then for me, Kaplan has these flashcards, and it's just like a set of flashcards that they can send you. I would take those to work with me and just work on memorizing those as often as I could. And even while I was reviewing at home, if I found a concept that was similar to one of the flashcards, I edited the flashcard and wrote something on it, and then would take that to work. And so, at least with scribing, you're not always seeing a patient, so you do have some downtimes. And during that downtime, I would review my flashcards.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I have kind of like, oh,
No, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was kind of like the same way too. So I scribed, so it was like shift worked also. So for me, I would do it same like weekly approach and kind of see like how my schedule would differ week to week. But it's definitely all about trying to like, because I was scribing full time in the ER and I was also shadowing a physician out in the clinic. So I had kind of like two jobs basically going on at the same time, but it's definitely kind of figuring out where can I squeeze in 2 to 3 hours, especially during the content review phase of reading this little section from the Kaplan book and taking the practice questions at the end. And definitely downtime at work, if I can, like, we'll bring like a little piece of paper and just like kind of write down and try to jot down over and over again, like kind of the topic that I had for that day and try to help memorize and get it like stuck in my head a little bit would be the best way for me too.
That's great. I'm backing up here a little bit because Moses put in the chat also on the cars section that he would write out, he'd go through a paragraph, like while you were reading, I think, right? And just take little notes there so you can like find keywords and concepts. So as you go along, you didn't have to find them. What's the cost of all this? If you don't mind me asking what you spent. We have an idea that it's expensive. My follow-up, my next question is, should people try to take an in-person course versus self-study? So does anybody have a comment about cost?
I could talk about my cost. So I paid I think it was $300 for UWorld. And like I said earlier, quality over quantity. I really wanted to stick to one resource. So my QBank was purely UWorld, and they have 2,000 questions, and you can make like your own kind of custom practice exam and stuff. So I really stuck with that. On top of the actual MCAT, that was like another $300. So, and then plus AAMC practice exams, I would say like $650. But I just do want to mention real quick, they have the FAP, the fee application waiver, I think, or something like that. If you qualify for it, they give you a ton of free resources. So definitely check that out on AAMC.
Yeah, great. And usually I tell people that's the first thing you do. Please go look at the AAMC. It's their test. Go and download that. It's a plan. How to organize. How to plan. Your study. How to get a calendar together. And I think on that thing it says hours and hours and hours, like maybe 40 to 60 hours is just figuring out what resources you're going to use. Your first step is just spending hours looking at how you're going to do this. Should people take an in-person course rather than self-study?
So the first time I took an MCAT, my MCAT, I did the in-person Kaplan course. And I think if you have the time to study it like they're recommending you to, it would be beneficial. But for me, that ended up just being an hour a week that I would have to make time to try to go to. So it wasn't super beneficial to me. I preferred just kind of like the self-paced where you can create your own practice problems and look at the content that you need as opposed to the in-person, because they have their set schedule. And if they're covering a topic that you know very well, then you're just sitting there learning about something you already know.
Great, thank you. I would say if you're not going to take a course, you better have the discipline part, organization, discipline, and then self-analysis, reflection. Am I doing what I need to do? So yes, a few of you have repeated the question, so thank you. The question is, has anybody any experience with using Blueprint? Do y'all know? Does anybody in the chat, in the meeting, have any experience? So Amber, I don't know, do you want to tell us anything about it? Oh, it's formerly Next Step. It used to be called, I've heard of it, but I can't really recommend it. I do want to say, I meant to say earlier, when Haley gives her tips, she tells you that she thinks, in her opinion, the Princeton practice tests are less like the test, and actually went into too much detail is what she is advising us. But again, we'll post that video of hers. And Sharon wants to shout out to the Berkeley Review. They have a live class in California. They switched to Zoom, and Sharon thought it was great. You want to speak up, Sharon?
Yes, Dr. Callaway. Berkeley Review, I had their material. It's so dense. It's like 2 feet tall, you know, of books they are. And I tried to go through it on my own and kind of correlate with Khan Academy. That was not a winning combo. And literally at the end of June, because I had 3 dates for MCAT this year that didn't happen. At the end of June, I saw someone like do an at, you know, to their account on Instagram that they were on Zoom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I was ready this year to literally go to California for 6 weeks and sit in one of their live courses.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing I didn't do that, but they went immediately to Zoom. I think they had a couple of live locations in California that were not shut down. And you know my story, Dr. Callaway. You know, I mean, what course have I not taken? You know, what degree have I not acquired? You know, I've just got too much stuff. And I had too many resources, and I knew that. But what makes the deal breaker or the deal maker with the Berkeley Review is the owner, Todd Bennett. These are master teachers for content. And Todd's experience is 30 years of teaching a prep course for MCAT, and his analysis is information about the test, the culture of the test, the questions on the test. And one thing I want to do, this is a shout out to you guys, and I'm really non-trad. Actually, Dr. Callaway and I are like twinsies, except she's the doc and I'm not. This is what Todd said. AAMC recycles questions, and they do. And if you do every single AAMC question, passage, etc., more than once, you are going to see these things on your MCAT when you sit and take it. Those of us that are retakers already know that. You can see the same thing that comes up again. You're a retaker, you take a course, say, well, I know that. I mean, I don't know it, but I know I saw that. So it's very important that, and I didn't do it. Lord above, I've not done it, but I've done it this time coming up for January. I've done every single AAMC material, full length, etc.
Yeah.
And the key, according to Enrique, with JAMP, when he was with JAMP, Enrique also, is for the JAMP population, 8 full lengths is the magic number to get you over 500. That's what I have to say.
Great.
Berkeley Review, 2,000, they'll let you pay it out.
Great.
They will let you pay it out. Almost everybody will let you pay it out. Y'all ask for a payment plan and they'll do that. They every one of them, Kaplan, EK, etc. Blueprint, I like Ryan Gray. I think he's got great material. His books are wonderful. I'm disappointed that he kind of aligned himself with Next Step and Blueprint. So that's
Okay, well,
all I have
thank
to
you.
say.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. We should wrap it up now, in respect for everybody's time. Let's see. I would like to answer this one. Are the number of times you take or retake the MCAT a red flag? It could be. You need to ask around what people say, what people think. When I see somebody who's taken it time after time and it hasn't changed, I think I would love to talk to that person and tell them all of these things that we learned from our experts today, especially now since I have so many new notes now and better ideas from y'all. But it's not when we see it improve, you know, and when we see people like Victoria and Moses and Connie and Justin who stuck with it and then did really well. You can tell that they did that self-analysis piece, and they got things to work. So it's not a red flag. It's not a red flag for us. So we've had great students who took it, and the 5th time was the magic. So I hope you all don't have to do that. So if there, I think we should go. It's 1:04. Thank you all so much for being here. we'll post this on the Long School of Medicine channel. Our Facebook page, the Club Pre-Med Facebook page, has a lot of MCAT activity, and there is the next Q&A on MCAT with our students and others is on Tuesday, December the 29th. Vanessa, is that at noon? Do you know? But if you're
It's a noon presentation, so we'll be distributing that information through email once again, and it'll be on their Facebook page as well.
yes, great. So if you look in your email and on the page, you'll have the resources. Do you remember how many full-length AAMC tests there are? Four, says Moses. Thank you very much. I think when I look at the tip that I was going to close with, I think we've said everything. You know, aim high, hang in there, look and really do some self-reflection about what you're accomplishing, and regroup, ask for help, ask more advice along the way. I want to thank, this was just fabulous. Thank you so much. Don't y'all want to like applaud them? So y'all can unmute and say thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Very, very, very helpful to hear from y'all. You've done great great accomplishments, and you have wonderful stories to tell, like the rest of you, So keep up the hard work. We're here to help you. Watch for the next Club Pre-Med web chat, and we'll help you with other things. And I hope that you all will enjoy, and thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. Thank you everybody for being here. I hope you all enjoy a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. I'm going to say Merry Christmas for those of you who celebrate that. Whatever you are, I think it's still Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah. I think there's one more night. Happy everything you may celebrate. I hope you have a season of joy and love and some comfort here, that we're having a new year to look forward to. So you all have a very blessed holiday, and thank you for being here. Thanks, special guest.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, if you
Thank
unmute
you.
to say bye, that'd be so nice.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Very
you.
welcome.
Thank you guys.
See
Bye,
you
Dr.
later.
Matthew.
See you next time. Take care.